Okay, we're going to put the Dr. Diff brake kit on, the rear disc brake kit on the back of our 8 3/4 inch rear end for our 71 Demon. And what Gage is doing right now is he's taking the nuts off of the backing plate that secures the axle to the housing itself. So there's 5 nuts. He'll take all 5 of those things off. We're working on the side with the adjustable end play there for the bearings, so we can adjust the tension on it. The other side on these does not have that. So anyway, we'll go ahead and take these nuts off, get all 5 of them off, and then we'll knock out the axle. All right, the nuts are all off from those 5. Now you can go ahead and pull off the backing plate, pull it back a little bit. At some point it'll drop out, and then what I want you to do is grab the axle and start pulling the axle out. You can see the bearing and everything comes out along with it. So this is the axle, complete unit there that is being pulled out. And try not to wreck the ends. And there she is. We got a full axle out of the housing now. Inside the housing, it's clean. We'll just clean that up with a rag to make sure there's no debris or sediment or anything in there. And we'll get to work on putting on the backing plate. Okay, the next step is we have to put the gaskets in. And what we'll do is, these did not come with the Dr. Diff kit. So we ordered them online. I think it was $10 for, you get 2 of the white gaskets and 2 of the steel and rubber coated gaskets. This one's gonna go on first on the edge here. Go ahead. Okay, then next up is going to be the bracket itself. So this is really a nice unit that comes from Dr. Diff, and it gets oriented. It goes on and gets oriented facing toward the rear of the car. So it's up and toward the rear. And then the last thing we do is we put on the rubber gasket, or the foam gasket. And the foam gasket just goes up against the outside face of the caliper bracket. Cool. Next up is going to be, we're going to put the axle back into the unit, and then we will start threading the 5 bolts that go back on. So one thing you'll notice is this has got the adjustable collar on it. That's because it puts a preload on the bearings that are used there on the ends of the axle tubes. So we'll get the 5 nuts on. We'll cinch those down really tight. I've backed off the collar here quite a bit. And so as soon as we've got the axle bracket bolted down super tight, then I'll go ahead and I'll snug up the collar here until it's tight, and then back it off just a little bit to be able to test how much play that we have with the axles. So we'll go ahead and get this buttoned up. Be right back. Okay, we've got 4 of the 5 bolts all tightened up. The last one's going to be a lock mechanism. So what we'll do is we'll lock down the adjustment collar. Go ahead until it gets pretty tight. Looks pretty tight. Doesn't have to be super hard. There you go. You're good. That's good. Okay, and what'll happen is if you pull on the axle and try to wiggle it, you shouldn't have any play whatsoever. So go ahead and pull on this here, and you can see there's virtually no wiggle. So what we want to do is we want to back off that lock collar a little bit. So now go in the opposite direction of what you were doing, and yeah, back that thing off a little bit. We're going to get it to the point where, go ahead a little bit more. We're going to get it to the point where now if you grab the axle and you move it a little bit, you can see if there's any free play there. Go ahead and do that. Okay, quit backing it off and do that.
Do what?
Grab the axle and see if there's any free play there. Not a whole lot, so we're going to try to get a little bit more. Nope. I think you need a little bit more. If you over tighten these things, what you'll do is you'll burn out your bearings because they won't be able to spin freely. And if you underdo it, then there. So now we've got a tiny bit of adjustment. I think it's probably a little too much, so we'll go back the other way and we'll nail it now, and get it dialed in. You just want a little tiny bit of play. There you go. That's probably about right. There you go. And you can see we've just got a tiny bit of play there. Not too tight, not too not tight. And what we'll do next is we will put the lock mechanism on. Because the lock mechanism is going to land right on top of one of the studs there, the crowns, what we'll do is we'll move it up either tighter or looser so it'll slip right into place, and then we'll snug that one down as well. We'll retorque the bolts all the way around the axle, and this side will be done for that step. Okay, the last step is the locking collar here. So there's this little bracket, and the little bracket basically gets locked between the castle parts and then tightened down. So go ahead and tighten it down. I'm just going to hold it in place so it doesn't skip out of the way. And now we get that nice and cinched down. Cool. Okay, that's all in. It looks good. If we look under here, we see that that's fully engaged, and we'll keep that from moving around. And last step is we're just going to go ahead and crisscross and tighten down the bolts. So that's no problem. Then we'll move on to the next step of hanging the calipers. Okay, next up, what we have to do is we have to hang the brackets, the calipers on the bracket. And in the kit, you'll get a whole bunch of washers. You'll notice these are all different width washers. What ends up happening is you've got to put the rotor on, and then make sure that the caliper itself is centered on the rotor. So we'll go ahead and we'll just place the rotor on the end of the axle here, and then we'll put the caliper bracket on and take a look at how close we are. Then we'll have to choose which combination or which single washer is the right width to help us center the caliper on top of the rotor. Okay, so we've got the rotor out. The rear rotors that come with this are the Napa Premium rotors. 488117 is the model number, and it's basically just a big steel hat, and it goes right on there. So go ahead and put that on. There you go. Now, as you do that, one tip that we've seen is take a lug nut and get it started there on the bottom, and snug that down. And what that'll do is it'll help somewhat hold the rotor on the edge of the axle. Okay, with the caliper on the end of the axle housing, next step is to grab the brake caliper itself and mount it. And one quick tip is, took me a while to see this, but you'll notice it says the letter R. The other side actually says L. So you know this is the right side caliper, and orient yourself. That'll be the passenger side caliper. So that's what's going to slide on there. So just make sure you get them on the right way, and you'll see it as I back up and I give you a full view which direction all these things are supposed to go. Okay, next up we've got the caliper. You can see there are these two holes here that the bolts are going to run through. These need Loctite, so I'm going to flip this up, and I know normally you put the Loctite on the bolt itself. Sometimes it's easier just to run it into the threads. Okay, now if you could hold this, what I'm going to do is turn it around, and if you can come over here on this side and look, we're going to set this down, and I've got the bolts kind of pre-hung in place here, and I'm just going to get them started. We ended up going with just the thinnest shim washer we could, because when you look at it, it actually looked like it was centered up really nice. So I didn't want it to be without one, and so the thinnest is what we decided to use. What we'll do next is we'll tighten these two bolts up completely. They've got Loctite on the inside of them now, and that'll secure our caliper. in the instructions, when it talks about the bleeding valve being pointing up, that's this here. So we want to have this at the top of the caliper as it's hanging here. And that's it. All right, so what you'll notice here is when we look at the rotor itself and we straighten that out, it is pretty centered there in the middle of the caliper. So I think we should be good there. It's not going to rub or anything else. One thing I did notice is the caliper itself, the hat, is machined a little bit bigger around all the studs and everything. So there is a little bit of play here. Now this will all go away when you bolt the wheel on, of course, and snug everything up with the lug nut. But until that is all in place, it's going to have a little bit of movement to it. So I think that'll be okay. But anyway, that's where we're at right now. And the other side was the exact same way. Okay, next up is the, just at the tip. There we go. That's going to be great. That'll never come off. Next up is the bracket here for the line. So basically that goes up onto the top of the caliper. Here you go. And there are 2 holes there on the back of it. And we'll get one just started and then pick up the other one there once that's going. And we'll get the other one in place. And as he does that, you'll see that the bracket itself is going to face up like this when it's all screwed in. Now, these caliper brackets actually have holes on the bottom too. That's because when you use these caliper brackets are interchangeable on each side. So on the other side, they would use the other set of holes. Cool. So we'll let him screw those things in and tighten those up real good. And then we will route the cable itself. Okay. So what we do is we'll take the brake hose here. We've got these nice braided stainless brake hoses. And it says run it underneath and back up top. This will actually connect up on top here with one more bolt in the kit. And in the meantime, what it does is it pops up through the bracket that we just put on. So you take that, you take the tab to secure it, and I don't know how else to do this, but if you hammer it pretty good, it goes in there, and now that's secured forever. So now all we have to do is complete the last step here, and the last step includes the special bolt. So I'll switch out real quick and we'll show you how to do that. We've got time to put the banjo bolt on and get this all going. So what you do is you take the special bolt. It's got a brass or copper washer. First one goes on. Then what you'll notice is it goes up through the banjo itself. The second washer then goes on the side of it, and ultimately you pull out the little plug that just keeps things out of the brake while it's being built and shipped and everything. And when you start screwing that in, so those 2 washers are going to keep everything sealed up nice and tight and keep fluids from leaking. And at that point then, we've got the braided stainless line in place. We'll just snug it down a little bit, and that'll be in great shape. Cool, so that kind of completes this brake installation here on one side. You can see over on the other side we've got it completed. And these face the rear as they are supposed to. It's a super slick, really nice setup, it seems like. So hopefully it works as good as it looks and everything, but it's relatively easy to put together. I will say the instructions aren't super clear, but they work. And next up is we are going to have to take the brake lines that we purchased, which are kind of pre-custom bent on one end. These will actually install back here and point backwards. And then we're going to have to run them across the front or the back of the axle tube here, up and over the top, and ultimately into the junction block. And we'll do the same thing from over here. So it's nice. They've got plenty of length on them. We'll be able to cut them And then ultimately we're just forming them in the shape that'll follow the contours of the differential itself. So that's all there is to it. Just do that on one side. That was the hard side that we just showed you because we had the adjustable bearing on it. The other side's just a bit easier. And from there, should be pretty easy, and plumb it up and see how it works. Hope you enjoyed this and got some value out of it.